Under the eternal shadow of the 41st millennium, the galaxy burned with unending war. Entire civilizations were consumed by the fires of faith, technology, and corruption. It was a universe where mercy had been forgotten, and hope was a relic of the past. Yet into this universe, fractured and merciless, appeared an anomaly. A lone man, clad in weathered combat gear, carrying a bow of strange alloy and eyes that had seen too many battlefields. His name was Clint Barton, known once, in another universe, as Hawkeye. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. No one could say exactly how he arrived. Some whispered that he was drawn through the warp, a flicker of probability caught in the chaos storms that bridge realities. Others believed the Emperor himself had willed his arrival, a weapon summoned from another age to serve humanity one last time. But whatever the truth, Barton emerged on the blasted plains of Armageddon, amidst the smoke of war and the stench of Prometheum. The sky burned red, the air thick with spores from the orc hordes descending upon the planet. When he first rose from the crater that marked his landing, he had no idea where he was. His communicator crackled uselessly. No satellites, no shield frequencies, no Avengers backup. Only static and thunder. His instincts took over. He checked his gear. Arrows intact, quiver loaded, composite bow still functional. He moved toward the sound of artillery, the way any soldier would. Through the haze, he saw them. Ranks of men in flak armor, faces grim beneath helmets, marked with the Aquila. The Imperial Guard. They fought like nothing he had seen before, disciplined, fanatical, dying by the dozens to hold their line. The orcs came in waves, roaring beasts of metal and muscle, their crude weapons belching fire. Barton watched for less than a minute before acting. He found high ground, a twisted hab-block roof overlooking the battlefield, and drew an arrow. It wasn't one of his usual trick arrows. There was no time to calibrate explosives or sensors, just a steel shaft and sharp edge. He exhaled, tracked the leading orc knob through his sightline, and loosed. The arrow flew true, slicing through the storm-racked air, burying itself between the creature's eyes. The orc fell, and the line of guardsmen below surged forward with renewed courage. "Whoever you are," Barton muttered, knocking another arrow, "guess I'm on your side." Over the next few hours, he became a ghost in the battlefield. His shots found targets across impossible distances. Orc warlords, mech boys, and gunners cut down before they could turn their weapons on the human lines. Imperial Vox channels began to whisper about the Phantom Archer on the ridge, a spirit of vengeance striking for the Emperor. When night fell, and the last of the orc assault broke apart, Barton descended to meet the soldiers he had saved. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Commissar Varus, greeted him with the stern suspicion typical of the Imperium. "You bear no insignia," Varus said, eyeing Barton's unfamiliar armor. "No record of you exists in the regiments of Armageddon. Are you a deserter? A heretic?" Barton just raised an eyebrow. "You're welcome, by the way. I saved a couple hundred of your men up there." The commissar studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "You fight well. The Emperor provides in strange ways. You'll report to me until your origins are verified." "Yeah," Barton said dryly. "Sure, let's go with that." In the following weeks, Clint adapted quickly to the rhythms of Imperial warfare. He learned the structure of the Guard, the rigidity of its discipline, and the sheer insanity of the wars they fought. He saw tanks the size of buildings rumble across ash plains, aircraft shaped like Gothic cathedrals, and soldiers who prayed before firing each shot. It was a world where faith replaced logic, and death was an everyday certainty. Yet amidst the horror, he found purpose again. The Imperium was flawed, brutal, and drenched in blood, but it was fighting for survival. Against the orcs, the Tyranids, the forces of chaos, Barton recognized the same kind of struggle that had defined his own life. Protect the helpless, hit the target, keep going, no matter how hopeless it seemed. His precision made him invaluable. Imperial commanders quickly learned to deploy him as a special operative, a one-man strike team capable of decimating enemy command structures. When an orc war boss fortified himself within a wrecked manufactorum, Barton slipped through the ruins, silent as shadow, and ended the campaign with a single arrow. When Chaos cultists attempted to summon a demon in the underhives, his shot pierced the summoner's heart mid-incantation, banishing the horror before it could emerge. The soldiers began to call him the Emperor's Arrow. Barton never corrected them. Still, the galaxy had darker secrets yet. On a distant world called Cadia, an inquisitor named Talaris heard reports of this anomaly. A human who wielded technology unknown to the Mechanicus, who fought with uncanny precision and refused to utter a single prayer. She arrived under veil of secrecy, her retinue sweeping through the front lines until they found him. "You're not from here," she said, eyes gleaming like cold fire as she studied him. "Not from any world in the Imperium. Your weapons defy classification. Your physiology matches human standard, yet your records are non-existent. Tell me, Archer, what world spawned you?" Barton met her gaze evenly. "Not sure you'd believe me if I told you." "Try me," she said. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Let's just say I'm from another galaxy. Another time. I fought for people who don't even exist here." The Inquisitor said nothing for a long moment. Then she turned to her aides. "Seal this area. He is not to leave my custody." And just like that, Barton's war changed again. He found himself aboard a black inquisitorial vessel cutting through the void. The ship's corridors were lined with runes of protection, its air thick with the hum of the Geller field warding off the madness of the warp. He was interrogated for days, subjected to scans and psychic scrutiny. He said little. What could he explain? That he had fought aliens, gods, and monsters before, but none like these? That his universe had heroes, and this one had none left? Eventually, Inquisitor Talaris made her decision. "You are no servant of chaos," she declared, "nor are you Xenos or Abomination. You are anomaly. Perhaps the Emperor sent you for a reason. You will serve under my command. Your skills will be repurposed." Barton folded his arms. "Repurposed how?" "To protect mankind," she said simply, "in ways the Imperium cannot." From that moment, Clint Barton became something new in the galaxy's endless war, a sanctioned operative of the Inquisition. He traveled from world to world, hunting heretics, silencing assassins, and dismantling alien infiltrations with surgical precision. Where the armies of the Imperium brought destruction, he brought control. Where chaos thrived in secrecy, his arrows found the hidden hearts of corruption. And though he would never admit it, the work gave him something he had lost long ago, a reason to keep fighting. But as he would soon learn, the darkness of the 41st Millennium was not so easily pierced, even by the sharpest arrow. Barton's first true mission under the Inquisition began in the frozen wastes of Carsis 9, a mining world choked by blizzards and haunted by silence. The planet's surface was littered with derelict machines, their metal bones frozen in the ice. A distress signal had been intercepted from one of the mining complexes, broadcasting a single, repeated phrase. The light beneath the frost must never awaken. Inquisitor Talaris suspected a chaos cult infiltration. Barton, however, had learned to trust the tone behind words, and this one carried desperation, not devotion. They descended aboard the Voidlance, landing in a storm that howled like the ghosts of a dead empire. The mining complex was nearly abandoned, its corridors dark, flickering with the weak pulse of dying lumen strips. The air smelled of rust and cold oil. Barton moved first, bow drawn, while a squad of stormtroopers followed in formation behind him, his breath fogged in the frigid air. "Ever think you might try heating these places before sending us in?" he muttered. Talaris's voice came through the Vox calmly. If the Emperor wished comfort, he would not have built his throne of iron. "Yeah," Barton replied. "I'm starting to see the pattern." They advanced through the facility, passing bodies frozen in place, workers with terrified expressions, as if they had seen something impossible before the ice claimed them. Strange runes had been carved into the walls, not by hand, but as if the metal itself had melted and reformed into symbols. Barton knelt beside one and brushed off the frost. "This isn't chaos script," he said. "It's older." Talaris's tone sharpened. "Older how?" "Older like alien older," Barton said. "This metal was reshaped with energy, not tools." Moments later, the stormtroopers' motion sensors picked up activity beneath the ice. Something was moving, slow, deliberate, powerful. "Whatever's down there," Barton said, stringing a new arrow tipped with a plasma detonator, "I'm guessing it's not here for small talk." They followed the signals into the main shaft, a yawning pit, descending kilometers below the surface. A faint, blue light pulsed from the depths, rhythmic like a heartbeat. The air vibrated. Talaris's stormtroopers established a perimeter as Barton secured a rope and began descending. The walls shimmered with faint inscriptions, and beneath the ice he could see machinery. Massive gears, conduits, and panels all fused into the bedrock. Halfway down, Barton felt the vibration increase. The blue light pulsed faster. He paused, heart pounding, realizing the entire shaft wasn't a mine. It was a sealed structure, a tomb. When he reached the bottom, he saw it, an enormous sarcophagus of metal and crystal, humming with ancient power. A sigil glowed faintly on its surface, the unmistakable emblem of the Necrons. "Talaris," he said through the Vox, "you're gonna want to see this." Before she could respond, the light from the sarcophagus intensified. The ice cracked like thunder. A humanoid figure began to rise, mechanical limbs unfolding with precision and purpose. Its eyes flared green, cutting through the gloom. Barton didn't wait. He fired the plasma arrow directly at the awakening construct. The explosion tore through the ice, sending fragments flying, but the Necron merely staggered, armor scorched, yet intact. It raised its weapon, a long-bladed staff that hummed with lethal energy. "Contact!" Barton shouted. "We've got a live one!" The stormtroopers rappelled down to reinforce him, their laser guns spitting beams of red across the chamber. The Necron moved with impossible speed, cutting through two soldiers in a single motion. Barton rolled behind cover, switching to an EMP arrow, and fired directly into the creature's chest. The impact sent a ripple of distortion through its metal frame, and for a moment it froze mid-step. "Now!" Barton yelled. The squad opened fire, pouring concentrated energy into the immobilized figure until its armor shattered and its body collapsed into fragments. Silence followed, broken only by the crackling of discharged weapons. Talaris descended slowly, her expression unreadable. "You have encountered these before?" she asked. "Not personally," Barton replied, examining the fragments. "But I've fought things that don't stay dead before. And this one, it's not gone. It's waiting. She regarded him for a long moment. Your instincts serve you well, Archer, but this discovery changes everything. They recovered fragments of the Necron's weapon and core matrix, then detonated the shaft to seal it. As the Void Lance lifted off, Barton stared down at the white wasteland receding below. He'd faced gods, aliens, and tyrants before, but this was something older than war itself. Back aboard the ship, Talaris convened her inner council. This was not an isolated awakening, she said. Reports across the segmentum indicate similar energy surges. The Necrons are stirring. We must contain this. Barton leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. You said we. Does that mean I'm officially drafted? You are already serving, she replied. Your precision may be the only counter to the precision of these machines. Guess I've been promoted from Archer to Galactic Pest Control, he muttered. Over the following months, Barton's legend spread. On the Forge world of Hephaestra, he neutralized a Xenos infiltration by disabling their leader's power source mid-speech with a single arrow. On a derelict void station, he rescued an entire squad of Adeptus Astartes trapped in a malfunctioning gravity, well by using his grappling arrows to secure the failing generator. He earned the grudging respect of the Astartes, superhuman warriors who viewed ordinary men as fragile tools. When a Blood Angel captain asked him why he refused to wield a proper bolter, Barton had simply smirked. Because I don't miss. Yet even victories could not halt the encroaching dread. The Necron awakenings were accelerating. Entire star systems began to report vanishing populations, worlds silenced overnight. The Inquisition struggled to contain the truth, fearing panic within the already fractured Imperium. One night aboard the Void Lance, Talaris approached Barton in the observation chamber. Outside, the warp flickered like a sea of living fire. You've seen war, she said quietly, but not like this. He didn't look away from the window. War's the same everywhere. People fight, people die, and someone like me gets stuck in the middle. Perhaps, she said, but the difference here is that there will be no victory. Only survival. He smiled faintly. Lady, I've been surviving since the day I picked up a bow. Soon after, they received intelligence from the Ultramar sector, a distress call from a planet known as Calvaris. A Mechanicus research facility there had gone silent, last reporting that they had uncovered a relic capable of bending trajectory through time. Talaris's gaze hardened. That description matches the weapon you carry. Barton frowned. You think they've found another bow? Not a bow, she said. Something older. Perhaps something that brought you here. And in that moment, for the first time since arriving in this grim galaxy, Clint Barton felt something dangerous stir within him. Hope. If the artifact was what Talaris suspected, it might hold the key to returning home. But to reach it, they would have to descend into the heart of a Necron tomb world, where even the light of the Emperor dared not shine. He tightened the strap on his quiver, glanced at the burning stars, and whispered to himself, all right, one more mission. The Void Lance emerged from the warp above Calvaris, a planet draped in perpetual twilight. The surface shimmered with unnatural auroras, sickly green and violet hues dancing across the upper atmosphere. Barton stood on the command deck beside Inquisitor Talaris, studying the planetary scan. The readings showed massive subterranean power signatures, deep beneath the Mechanicus outpost. Looks like your friends dug a little too deep, Barton said, adjusting his gauntlet's readout. Talaris's expression remained composed, though her eyes betrayed unease. The Adeptus Mechanicus are ever ambitious. They seek knowledge even when it damns them. Guess we're about to find out what kind of damnation they woke. The landing zone was a field of scorched metal and broken servitors. Half-constructed defense turrets lay silent, their targeting arrays shattered. The once gleaming red banners of Mars hung in tatters, fluttering in an unnatural wind. Barton and his strike team advanced through the debris, their boots crunching on frozen ash. The outpost gates were open, too open. The air smelled of ozone and blood. Inside, the hallways were eerily silent, except for the occasional flicker of static from shattered Vox units. Tech priests lay where they'd fallen, their mechanical limbs twitching faintly as if their systems refused to acknowledge death. Barton crouched by one of them, scanning the remains. These wounds, plasma scoring, but not from last fire. Its cleaner Talaris knelt beside him. Necron gas technology? Thought so, Barton said grimly. And if they were here, that artifact's already in their hands. They followed the trail deeper into the facility. The deeper they went, the more the architecture changed. The familiar Gothic arches of Imperial design gave way to something smooth and metallic, seamless as liquid glass. The lights no longer flickered, they pulsed, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Talaris stopped. They have begun assimilating the structure. The tomb is awakening beneath our feet. Barton raised an eyebrow. You're saying the building is turning into one of theirs? Yes. The Necrons do not simply build, they reclaim. They entered the central chamber, a vast vault carved into the mountain. At its center stood a monolithic structure of black stone and shifting green light. Suspended above it was the artifact, a crystalline arc, humming with energy, faintly translucent. Even from a distance, Barton could feel its pull, like a bowstring drawn tight. I've seen a lot of weapons, he murmured, but this one's humming like it's alive. Because it is, Talaris replied. A fragment of Necron chronometric technology. They call it a phase aperture. It manipulates temporal space, bends time and distance as easily as we breathe. Barton stared, realization dawning. So that's it. That's what pulled me here. Possibly, she said. But if it is reactivated, the consequences could fracture reality itself. We must secure it. Before they could approach, the floor trembled. The black monolith split open with a shriek of grinding metal, and a column of green light erupted upward. Figures emerged from the shadows, ranks of skeletal Necrons, their eyes glowing with cold malice. At their head strode a towering figure draped in metallic robes, bearing a staff crowned with a pulsing sphere of green fire. The Cryptek, Talaris hissed. They are the engineers of the Necron dynasties. He will not relinquish the artifact. Then let's take it the hard way, Barton said, drawing his bow. The chamber exploded into chaos. Stormtroopers unleashed disciplined volleys of lasfire, cutting through the advancing Necrons. The Cryptek raised its staff, unleashing arcs of energy that disintegrated entire squads in moments. Barton moved between cover and shadow, firing arrow after arrow with unerring precision. Explosive tips shattered Necron limbs. EMP charges froze others mid-stride. But the Cryptek was different. Its mechanical gaze tracked him through the carnage, calculating every motion. Barton barely dodged a beam that scorched the floor where he stood. He rolled, drew a grappling arrow, and fired upward into the gantry above, pulling himself into the air just as another beam sliced past. "Hey, glowstick," he shouted, "over here." The Cryptek turned, raising its staff. Barton loosed a cluster of micro-arrows that detonated in a burst of kinetic force. The shockwaves staggered the cryptek long enough for Talaris to strike. She advanced with a relic blade glowing white-hot, severing the creature's staff in two. The cryptek howled in a sound that was not human, collapsing in a flicker of green static. The remaining Necrons froze, then disintegrated into dust. The chamber fell silent again, save for the low hum of the artifact still spinning above its cradle. Talaris approached cautiously. "We must deactivate it." Carefully, Barton looked up at the arc of light. "You sure deactivation's the right call? What if I could use it to—" "No," she cut in sharply. "We do not tamper with Xenos technology. Even the Mechanicus barely understands the machines of the past. You are here because the Emperor willed it. You remain because he requires it." He met her gaze evenly. "Or maybe I'm here because this thing dragged me through the wrong door. If I can find a way to reverse it—" The artifact flared. The energy surged outward in a wave that threw them both backward. Barton hit the floor hard, his vision swimming. When he looked up, the artifact's light had changed, no longer steady, but unstable, flickering between colors like a heartbeat, out of rhythm. Talaris shouted over the roar of the energy. "It's breaching the veil! Shut it down!" Barton scrambled to his feet, pulling a shock arrow from his quiver. On it! He aimed for the core, judging the rhythm of its pulses. Timing was everything. One shot, perfectly placed. He exhaled, steadied, and loosed. The arrow struck the crystalline node, dead center. The artifact imploded with a sound like tearing fabric. The light vanished. Silence followed, a heavy, suffocating silence. Barton lowered his bow slowly. Did it work? Before Talaris could answer, her gaze shifted. Look at the floor. Where the artifact had stood, reality itself was warping. A circular rift twisting in the air, like the reflection of a world seen through broken glass. Through it, Barton glimpsed flashes of color, familiar ones, blue skies, metal towers, a city that wasn't grimdark, but modern. His breath caught. That's Earth. Talaris stepped forward, her voice taut with warning. Do not move. The fabric is unstable. To enter could tear your mind apart. He stared at the shifting image, New York's skyline, distant but clear, the home he'd thought lost forever. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then quietly, he said, I've jumped through worse. Before Talaris could stop him, the rift shuddered violently. Arcs of green energy erupted outward. Barton turned his head, one last glance toward her. If this goes bad, find another me who shoots straighter. And then he stepped into the light. The world tore around him. Time folded, warped, and screamed. He felt his body dissolve into fragments of motion and thought, falling through colors and memories that weren't his own. For an instant, he was everywhere and nowhere. Then, abruptly, silence. He opened his eyes to a sky filled with stars, familiar stars, but beneath them was not Earth. It was another battlefield, another war zone. The architecture was alien, yet unmistakably imperial. He had crossed again, but not home, somewhere else. A deep metallic voice echoed across the plain. Welcome, marksman. You have entered the domain of the Silent King. And Barton, bruised, disoriented, and utterly exhausted, drew an arrow and muttered, Great. Another one. The horizon stretched before Barton like a wound in the universe. Vast metallic plains illuminated by cold, sickly green light. Great monoliths rose in the distance, each one humming with energy that made the air vibrate. The stars above were hidden by a thin veil of haze, giving the impression of being trapped inside a colossal tomb. He stood on what appeared to be a bridge of black stone, suspended over an endless chasm. His boots echoed as he moved, the sound swallowed by the oppressive stillness. Then, from the shadows ahead, emerged a figure, taller than any human, sculpted from living metal, crowned with an intricate headdress of silver filigree. The faint light of its eyes burned with ancient purpose. The being regarded him for a moment before speaking. "You carry the scent of time displaced," it said, in a voice like metal grinding on marble. "A fragment from beyond the stars. You are not of this era, nor of this reality." Barton steadied his bow. "You talk like a bad riddle. Who the hell are you?" "I am Sharek, the silent king of the Necron dynasties." The creature's voice reverberated like the tolling of a bell. "And you, Archer, have trespassed into my dominion." Barton exhaled slowly. "Yeah, well, I didn't exactly buy a ticket. Your pet cryptech opened a door, and I fell through it." The Silent King tilted his head as if studying a puzzle. "You bear no mark of the machine, no corruption of the warp. You are unbound. A living anomaly, being called worse," Barton muttered. "Look, if you can help me get back where I came from, I'll be out of your metal hair before you can blink." The king's mechanical form stirred. "Return to your primitive world. You misunderstand. You stand now upon the threshold of rebirth. The ancient stars stir, and I, who once doomed my people, seek to undo that fate. You could aid this effort." Barton narrowed his eyes. "You want me to help you resurrect your army." "Not resurrect," Zarek said, his tone soft yet commanding. "Correct. Restore balance. The galaxy rots under the weight of decay, Imperium, chaos, all sides consumed by folly. You fight for survival, but I fight for permanence. Aid me, and I may return you to the moment you were taken." The offer hung in the air, tempting yet heavy with danger. Barton had dealt with tyrants before, men and gods, who promised salvation in exchange for servitude. This felt the same. "Sorry, Tin King," he said finally. "I don't do empire building. I shoot things that try to control the universe." The Silent King regarded him without anger, only curiosity. "Then you will resist." "I'm pretty good at that." The king's retinue stepped forward. Triarch Praetorians, their weapons humming. Barton moved instinctively, diving behind a fallen column. His mind raced, calculating trajectories, distances, timing. The first Praetorian lunged, and Barton loosed a concussive arrow, the explosion sending shards of debris flying. He rolled, drew again, and fired a piercing arrow that tore through the creature's chest plate. The fight became a blur of movement and precision. Each shot was deliberate, each step measured. Barton moved like a shadow, arrows striking with surgical efficiency. But the Necrons were relentless, repairing, reconfiguring, adapting. One of them caught him across the shoulder with its staff, throwing him backward. He hit the ground hard, pain flaring through his ribs. Before the creature could strike again, a shockwave split the air. A beam of pure white energy erupted from the darkness, disintegrating the Necron mid-step. Barton looked up. A familiar silhouette stood in the distance. Inquisitor Talaris, her armor cracked, robes scorched from the teleportation burst that had flung her through the rift. She leveled her pistol, eyes blazing. "Did I miss the invitation?" she said dryly. Barton grinned despite the pain. "You've got great timing." Together, they fought with brutal precision. Her blade cutting through the Praetorians, his arrows finding every weak joint and gap. When the last of the constructs fell, the Silent King stood silent, unshaken. "You cannot kill what is eternal," Zarek said. "Even now, your defiance fulfills my purpose. You fight to preserve life, as do I. The difference lies in what you are willing to sacrifice." Yeah, Barton said, breathing hard. Well, I like my version of living better. The king extended a metallic hand toward the distant horizon, where faint outlines of tomb cities flickered to life. The Imperium will not endure. Its emperor decays upon his throne, his light dimming. You cannot change this universe's fate, but you could leave it, walk through time itself, if you accept my guidance. Barton hesitated. The thought of home gnawed at him. The possibility that Sarek could send him back, it was almost too much to ignore. But every instinct screamed that this was a trap. Talaris stepped closer, her voice low. He lies. The Necrons seek dominion, not balance. Their technology cannot be trusted. Barton gave a weary chuckle. Trust me, lady, I wasn't buying his sales pitch. Then stand with me, she said, and we will ensure this tomb remains sealed forever. The king's eyes flared. You cannot comprehend what you defy. I sought to save this galaxy from endless war, yet you cling to your delusions of freedom. So be it. The next cycle begins without you. The ground shook. Massive obelisks rose from beneath the metallic plane, each one channeling energy toward the king's throne. The air burned with static. Talaris shouted, "He's activating a world engine." Barton's instincts took over. He pulled one of his last EMP arrows, an experimental one, modified with Mechanicus components, and drew the string to full tension. Tell me that'll work on him. If you strike the throne core, perhaps, she replied. That's good enough. He took aim, focusing through the chaos. The world trembled, debris lifting from the ground as gravity itself distorted. The king's form blurred, merging with the throne's circuitry. Barton released the arrow. It flew straight into the heart of the energy core. For an instant, the entire world went silent. Then came the explosion, a surge of white light that consumed everything. When Barton opened his eyes, he was on his knees amid a sea of ash. The Silent King was gone. The throne lay shattered, its power extinguished. Talaris was beside him, her armor cracked but alive. "Is it over?" he asked, voice hoarse. "For now," she said, glancing at the sky. The auroras were fading, replaced by the cold stars. "But you have destabilized more than this tomb." The rift's energy pulse has echoed across the sector. The Imperium will take notice. Barton sheathed his bow, exhaustion heavy in his bones. "Then we better move before someone starts asking questions." They began the trek toward the extraction site. For a long time, neither spoke. Then quietly, Barton said, "You think the artifact's gone for good?" Talaris shook her head. "Such things are never gone, only hidden. And something tells me the galaxy is not finished with you yet." He gave a tired smile. "Story of my life." As the voidlets lifted them from the surface, Barton looked back one last time. The tomb world lay silent once more, but deep beneath, green lights still flickered faintly, like eyes waiting to open. He didn't know if he'd ever see Earth again. Maybe he wasn't meant to. Maybe his place was here, in a galaxy that needed someone to aim straight when everything else had gone crooked. Still, as the ship vanished into the void, a single thought lingered in his mind. If there was one thing Clint Barton knew, it was that no matter the universe, no matter the war, someone had to protect the innocent. And as long as he had an arrow left, he'd keep doing exactly that. Clint Barton had been in wars before. Wars of men, of spies, of shadows and monsters. But this was a war of gods. The air on the ravaged world of Cadia burned with ozone and ash. Imperial Guard regiments screamed prayers to the Emperor as they fell beneath demon claws. Thunderhawks roared overhead, spitting death into the warp-infested sky. Clint stood atop a ruined fortress, his bow in hand, a weapon both absurd and sacred in this world of bolters and plasma rifles. But absurdity had never stopped Hawkeye before. He loosed an arrow, a streak of violet light spiraling through the air, that struck a demon in the eye and exploded in a burst of holy fire. He hadn't designed that arrow. Magos Rel of the Adeptus Mechanicus had. Clint had watched him bless the arrowhead with binary prayers and Mechanicum sigils, infusing it with what they called machine spirit sanctity. To Clint, it was just another arrow that needed to hit its mark. He drew another, knocked, released. A second demon fell. He wasn't trying to win the war. He was trying to hold the line. Below him, the surviving guardsmen, those still sane enough to fight, rallied behind the lone figure in purple and black. They didn't know who he was. They didn't care. In a galaxy that had long forgotten the concept of hero, they simply saw one. Through his visor, Clint watched the tactical overlay update, Vox signals fading one after another. Cadia was dying. The Eye of Terror pulsed above like a wound in reality, bleeding nightmares into the void. He muttered, "Guess it's time for Plan B." The problem was, there was no Plan B. A metallic voice crackled through the Vox link implanted in his ear. "Agent Barton," came the calm, monotone voice of Magos Rel. "The device is ready. However, the warp flux is unstable. I calculate a 67.2% chance of catastrophic failure." Clint grinned. "I've worked with worse odds." The device was a gravitic anchor, a hybrid of Terran and Mechanicus tech designed to seal a warp rift by generating a counter-frequency. In simpler terms, a bomb that could patch a hole in reality if you ignored the small chance it would also vaporize everything within 1,000 kilometers. Clint sprinted across the battlements, leaping over debris, arrows whistling from his bow as he went. Each shot found its mark with terrifying precision. A demon heart, a corrupted turret, a Chaos Marine visor slit. He wasn't enhanced by the Emperor's gene forges or blessed by psychic flame. He was just human, perfectly, stubbornly human. And that was exactly why the Imperium soldiers followed him. He reached the central spire, where the anchor pulsed with crimson energy. Tech priests chanted in binary, their mechanical arms whirring as they maintained the machine's volatile core. Clint dropped beside them, scanning the horizon. The demonic tide was closing in fast. Rel's mechanical voice echoed again. "You must activate the device manually. Once primed, there will be no return path." Clint hesitated only a moment. "That's what I figured." He reached into his quiver and pulled out one last arrow. Longer, heavier, inscribed with glowing runes. The Magos had called it a holy vector, capable of channeling a machine spirit signal. Clint called it his trigger. He planted his feet, drew the bow to full tension, and aimed straight at the device's central conduit. The world seemed to slow. The screams, the thunder, even the warp's whispers dulled into silence. He fired. The arrow struck home. Light exploded outward, in waves of white and gold, consuming the battlefield in brilliance. The air tore open as the gravitic anchor pulsed against the warp. Reality convulsed. Clint was thrown backward, slamming into shattered stone. His vision blurred. Through the chaos, he saw the rift flicker, then begin to close. For the first time in decades, the Eye of Terror dimmed, but the cost was immediate. The spire collapsed inward, dragging the anchor, the priests, and Clint into a vortex of collapsing matter. He tried to grab hold of the stone ledge, but his glove slipped. Then, nothing. Darkness. A moment later, he awoke in silence. The world around him was gone. He floated in a void of endless stars, weightless. His visor flickered back to life, HUD indicators struggling to orient themselves. Then a figure appeared before him, tall, luminous, robed in golden armor that radiated light like a miniature sun. The Emperor of Mankind, or something pretending to be him. The presence spoke not in sound, but in thought, its voice both infinite and intimate. You are not of this galaxy. Clint swallowed hard. No, I guess I'm not, yet you have fought for it. I fight where I'm needed. The golden figure studied him. Humanity, long ago we lost such purity of purpose. You remind me of what we once were. Clint smirked weakly. Flattery from a god? I'll take it. The light dimmed slightly. Cadia is gone, but the rift closes. For now, you have altered the pattern. The warp does not forget such interference. Nor do my enemies. So what happens to me? That depends, the Emperor said. Will you serve again? Clint looked down at his hands, scarred, trembling slightly from exhaustion. He thought of home, of the faces he'd never see again, of the endless cycle of wars he'd already survived. Then he looked back up at the golden light. Yeah, he said. Guess I'll stick around. The light enveloped him. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing on the deck of a massive starship, the Gloria Invictus, flagship of the Ultramarines. Marines in cobalt armor turned to stare at him, their massive frames towering over the slender Terran. A voice thundered from the command dais. Identify yourself, stranger. Clint straightened, brushing dust from his uniform. Clint Barton. Designation, Hawkeye. I'm here to help the Space Marine captain, his pauldrons marked with the sigil of Ultramar, studied him for a long, silent moment. Then he extended a gauntleted hand. Then stand with us, warrior of terror. And just like that, Clint Barton, a man from another universe, became a soldier of the Imperium. But the galaxy was vast. Beyond Cadia, 1,000 other worlds still burned. The forces of chaos had been dealt a wound, but they would recover. And somewhere in the darkness, the echo of Clint's impossible shot had drawn attention. Not from gods of man, but from things older, hungrier, and infinitely more curious. The webway trembled. Eldar seers whispered of a foreign marksman whose presence disrupted fate itself. The orcs sang of a skinny Humi who shot faster than any shooter. And on a dark throne in the Eye of Terror, Abaddon himself felt the sting of that moment. An irritation, a reminder that something in the pattern had shifted. Clint Barton had changed the game, and the galaxy would never be the same again. He leaned against the viewport of the Gloria Invictus, watching the stars drift by. Somewhere out there, chaos still brewed. He drew an arrow, inspected its fletching, and smiled faintly. Guess I'll need a bigger quiver. The war wasn't over, not even close. And Hawkeye, protector of Cadia, ally of the Imperium, the man who shot the warp, was just getting started. The Gloria Invictus cruised through the void, a cathedral of war gliding in perfect silence. Its stained glass viewports reflected the dying light of distant suns, while the rumble of reactor cores echoed like a heartbeat through its metal veins. Inside, amid towering servitors and chanting tech adepts, Clint Barton walked the corridors of the Imperium's greatest warriors as an outsider who refused to bow. The Ultramarines regarded him with equal parts curiosity and suspicion. To them, he was a legend whispered through Vox channels, the mortal archer who had sealed a warp rift. To Clint, he was just a man who got lucky. Still, he adapted quickly. He spent his days training with the ship's marksmen, the Scout Marines, teaching them how to fight without relying on their bolters. A weapon's only as good as the one holding it, he told them, and you can't always trust your tech. Trust your instincts. They listened. Even the gene-forged super soldiers could sense the truth in his simplicity. There was something deeply human about Clint Barton's style. Raw, intuitive, uncorrupted by doctrine or dogma. He wasn't preaching faith, he was teaching survival. In time, his legend spread beyond the ship. Inquisitors requested debriefings. The Adeptus Mechanicus demanded his genetic records. Even the ecclesiarchy whispered that perhaps he was touched by the Emperor's will. Clint ignored them all. He wasn't here for politics or prophecy. He was here to fight. Then came the call from Ultramar itself. Captain Varian, the ship's commander, summoned him to the bridge. The chamber was vast, filled with command thrones and hololithic projections of entire star systems. The captain's armor gleamed with honor markings, his voice cold but calm. "Barton," he said, "we have received astropathic distress from the world of Eurithus 4. An incursion, chaos cults rising in the underhives. Normally a matter for the Arbites, but they are invoking your name." Clint blinked. "My name?" Varian nodded. "They claim to serve the eye that aims true. Their symbol, a bow drawn against a burning star. They chant in the tongue of the warp, calling you the marksman of fate." Clint sighed, rubbing his temple. "I take one shot that closes a warp rift, and suddenly I'm a god to the lunatics." "Indeed," Varian said. "The chapter master believes the symbolism may be deliberate. Chaos may be twisting your legend for its own ends. We are to purge the cult. You will accompany us." Clint stared at the projection of Eurithus 4, a hive world blackened by industry, its lower levels drowned in smoke and shadow. "Yeah," he muttered, "let's go clean up my fan club." The Gloria Invictus dropped out of warp above Eurithus 4. The planet looked sick, a grey sphere wrapped in storms. From orbit, Clint could see entire continents of smog and flame. The Ultramarines deployed with precision, drop pods raining like meteors into the underhive sprawl. Clint descended beside them, armored only in his adaptive combat suit, bow in hand, quiver full of Mechanicus-crafted arrows. The landing zone was chaos, ruined hab blocks, burning manufactorums, and waves of corrupted mortals screaming prayers to the true marksman. Their flesh twisted, their eyes black with warp corruption. The Ultramarines advanced in formation, their bolters roaring. Clint slipped between them like a ghost, picking targets the Marines couldn't see. Snipers on the rooftops, summoners behind cover, cult leaders mid-ritual. Each arrow found its mark with surgical precision. Explosive tips vaporized limbs, EMP shafts disrupted demon portals, plasma-coated arrows seared through armor like molten light. But the cult was vast. For every wave they cut down, more emerged, chanting Clint's name. He caught snippets of their cries through the Vox static. "The eye that aims true has come. He delivers the Emperor's judgment with his bow of light." Others whispered darker phrases. "He fires for the ruinous powers, the arrow of change, the hunter of fate." Clint ignored the noise, but as the battle dragged on, he began to feel it. A pulse in the air, a rhythm that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. Every time he drew his bow, the warp stirred. Reality quivered. His shots became faster, more precise, almost guided by unseen hands. "Barton," Captain Varian's voice growled over the Vox, "your energy readings are spiking. The warp is reacting to you. Control it." "I'm not doing anything," Clint snapped. I'm just shooting. Then stop shooting, Clint paused. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then from the smoke, a new figure emerged. Tall, cloaked in torn ceramite, its body wreathed in purple flame. A chaos sorcerer. Its voice slithered through the air like silk and venom. Ah, the false marksman. The mortal who dared touch the skein of fate, its eyes burned like dying suns. You think your arrow closed the rift, human? You only redirected it. The sorcerer raised a staff carved from bone. The ground split open, spilling warp fire as demons clawed their way into reality. Your shot tore a hole elsewhere. The warp remembers your hand. Clint tightened his grip on the bow. Good. Means I'll know where to aim next. He fired. A blinding shot that sliced through the sorcerer's wards and struck it square in the chest. But instead of dying, the creature laughed, a hideous, echoing sound that shook the air. You are part of the pattern now, marksman. The galaxy turns upon your aim. The explosion that followed leveled half the district. When the smoke cleared, the sorcerer was gone. The demons, however, were not. They swarmed like shadows given flesh. Clint fought beside the Ultramarines for what felt like hours, dodging claws, loosing arrow after arrow, his quiver almost empty. The air shimmered with energy, his vision blurred at the edges, reality bending like heat distortion. He could feel the warp pressing against him, whispering through the cracks of his mind. One shot can unmake fate, it hissed. One arrow to pierce the veil. He nearly dropped his bow, but then he saw them. The guardsmen, the civilians, the terrified faces behind the Marines' wall of ceramite. They were watching him again, believing again. That snapped him back. He drew his final arrow, its shaft glowing with golden light. He didn't know why it glowed. Maybe the Mechanicus had built something new into it. Maybe something else was guiding him. It didn't matter. He aimed at the warp breach and fired. The arrow vanished into the rift, and for a moment, silence returned. Then, with a thunderous shockwave, the portal imploded. The demons screamed and disintegrated. The light faded. Eurystheus IV was saved. Again, somehow, the impossible man with the bow had sealed the warp. Captain Varian approached him through the dust. You are not merely lucky, he said. The Emperor's hand moves through you. Clint wiped sweat from his brow. Or maybe I'm just a guy who doesn't miss. Varian's helm inclined slightly. Faith and skill often wear the same armor. Clint didn't answer. He looked up at the cracked sky, the warp storm fading into twilight. He could still hear the whispers, faint but persistent. Something had changed again. The galaxy was watching him. And far away, beyond the borders of the Imperium, in the infinite labyrinth of the webway, another pair of eyes had turned toward him, ancient, calculating, full of sorrow. The Eldar had taken notice, and they feared what his next arrow might do. Deep within the webway, that impossible network of tunnels between realities, a conclave of Eldar farseers gathered beneath the fractured light of infinity crystals. The air shimmered with psychic energy as their minds joined in silent communion. Images flickered between them, visions of the man with the bow, the mortal who could wound the warp itself. He is an anomaly, whispered Farseer Ilena, her voice as thin as spider silk. A thread that does not belong in the tapestry of this age. His presence distorts the skein. Another, older seer, nodded slowly. The Mon-Ki should not possess such power. Yet the webway trembles each time he draws his weapon. He strikes without knowing, and fate shifts. They turned their gaze to a pool of psychic light. Within it shimmered Clint Barton, standing among the Ultramarines aboard the Gloria Invictus, polishing his bow, unaware that the galaxy itself was whispering his name. Farseer Elena's tone hardened. If he continues, he may unravel the balance between the Imperium and the Materium. His shot sealed one wound in the warp, but opened another. Another seer leaned forward. Then he must be guided, or removed. Elena's eyes gleamed. I will go. Back aboard the Gloria Invictus, Clint was finally starting to breathe again. The battle for Eurithus IV was over. The planet was stable. The cults had been purged. For once, there was quiet. He stood on the observation deck, watching the stars drift by like distant campfires. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His muscles ached. His quiver was empty, except for a single arrow. The one he swore he'd never use unless the universe left him no choice. Captain Varian approached, his armor gleaming in the low light. You are troubled? Clint didn't turn. You ever get the feeling the universe is laughing at you? Varian folded his massive arms. I feel nothing of the sort, but I know when something unnatural stirs. The librarians sense a resonance around you, like an echo that should not exist. Yeah, well, Clint said quietly, that's me. The walking echo. Before Varian could answer, alarms blared. The ship's vox crackled with static. Unidentified craft emerging from the webway, Varian barked orders. Battle stations. Shields to full. But before the Ultramarines could fire, the void itself shimmered, and from the distortion, a slender vessel emerged, gleaming like liquid moonlight. Its surface rippled with runes. It wasn't a ship built for war. It was alive. Varian's voice thundered, Eldar. The word carried centuries of distrust and blood. Clint squinted. They're not firing. A beam of light connected the Eldar craft to the Gloria Invictus. A single figure materialized on the deck. Tall, graceful, robed in psychic light. Farseer Elena. Her gaze was sharp, ancient, unafraid. Varian's hand went to his bolter. Which? Clint stepped forward. Hold up. She's not here to start a fight. Elena's voice carried the tone of both a whisper and a command. You are correct, human. I have come to speak, not to kill. Her eyes settled on Clint. You are the anomaly. He sighed. You people really need better small talk. Varian moved closer. Say what you came to say, Zeno, and be gone before I... Elena raised a hand, silencing even the mighty ultramarine captain. The threads of fate are unraveling. The bowman's actions have pierced the weave of time itself. His first arrow sealed a wound in the warp. His second altered its flow. The next will either save or doom reality. Clint frowned. You're saying my shots are changing fate? Elena nodded. Each one carries resonance, echoes from a world that should not exist. You are not part of this galaxy's pattern, yet the warp recognizes your will. You are a fixed point in a sea of chaos, and chaos fears you, Varian growled. Then we should use him as a weapon. Elena turned to him sharply. A weapon wielded by ignorance is more dangerous than any demon. He must learn what he carries before it destroys him. Clint folded his arms. And how exactly do I do that? Elena extended her hand. Come with me. The craft world Ulthway will show you the truth. Varian took a step forward. He goes nowhere. He fights for the Imperium. Now Clint looked between them. A human army that saw him as a soldier, and an alien seer who saw him as a threat to existence. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he exhaled. If it helps me understand what's happening, I'll go. On one condition, I come back. Elena inclined her head. You have my word. Varian's fists clenched, but he said nothing. He simply nodded once, the silent acknowledgement of a warrior who knew when control must be surrendered. And with that, Clint Barton, Hawkeye, vanished in a beam of psychic light. The world he awoke in was nothing like the Imperium. The craft world Ulthwé was alive. Its walls pulsed like veins of light, its spires hummed with psychic energy. Everywhere he looked, Eldar moved with quiet grace, their eyes filled with both pride and tragedy. Elena guided him through endless corridors of crystal and starlight until they reached a massive chamber, a dome filled with floating shards of glowing energy, each representing a possible future. "This," she said softly, "is the Infinity Circuit, the collective soul of our kind. And now it whispers your name." Clint stared at the glowing web. "That's creepy." Elena gestured toward one of the shards. Within it, Clint saw himself, drawing his bow, loosing an arrow that split the heavens. Worlds burned, others flourished. Entire timelines collapsed or bloomed, depending on the path of that single shot. He stepped back. "No, no way. I don't have that kind of power." Elena's eyes softened. "You do not seek it. That is why you possess it. Your will, your refusal to be bent by gods or chaos, grants you strength, neither mortal nor divine. You are the paradox of free will." Clint rubbed his temples. "So what? I'm a cosmic coin toss with a bow?" She almost smiled. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you are the galaxy's last reminder that choice still exists." He stared at the web of light. Dozens of possible futures shimmered around him, some glorious, some horrifying. But one stood out, a vision where the stars went dark, and he stood alone against something vast and unseen. "What is that?" he asked. Elena's expression darkened. "The true enemy, the one who waits beyond even chaos, the void thing that feeds on all realities, the one your arrow first awakened." Clint's voice was barely a whisper. "So every shot I take gets its attention?" "Yes," she said, "and it is watching." He exhaled slowly, staring into the infinite. "Guess I'll have to make my next shot count then." Elena bowed her head. "Then may the scheme favor your aim, marksman of fate." But as he turned away, her mind filled with dread. She had seen one last vision, one she dared not speak. A future where Clint Barton's final arrow would not save the galaxy, but end it. The skies above Cadia burned again. Warp lightning tore across the heavens like veins of a wounded god, splitting the firmament into threads of violet and crimson. Imperial ships circled the dying planet, their hulls cracked and bleeding fire. The ground below was a graveyard of titans, wrecked tanks, broken knights, shattered banners, fluttering over endless fields of ash. And in the midst of it all stood Clint Barton, bow in hand, visor cracked, armor dented, and blood tracing down his face. He had seen wars before. He had seen cities burn and gods fall. But nothing, not even the most apocalyptic of his homeworld's nightmares, could compare to this, the end of Cadia. The Imperium was fracturing under the sheer pressure of chaos. Every moment, the air screamed with demonic laughter, and the warp itself seemed to lean closer, whispering promises of ruin. Yet Barton remained unmoved. His focus was absolute. His body trembled from exhaustion, but his aim did not. Each arrow he loosed found a demon's heart, a heretic's skull, a Chaos Space Marine's exposed joint. He had long abandoned the notion of survival. This was not about living. It was about holding the line. In the command trench beside him, an Astra Militarum officer shouted orders through the smoke. "The breach is collapsing. Pull back." Clint didn't move. "No," he said quietly. "If you pull back, they'll flood the line. You keep your men on the bastion. I'll handle the breach." The officer hesitated. One man can't. Watch me. Barton climbed the ridge alone, dragging with him a cracked quiver filled with the last of his arrows. Each one had been hand-forged by a tech priest who had come to admire the alien marksman. Arrows tipped with blessed adamantium, etched with binary litanies of precision. They sang as they cut the air, carrying the Emperor's justice in every flight. From his perch, Barton surveyed the chaos below. Demons spilled from a tear in reality, a churning storm of red and black. A greater demon of Khorne, towering over the battlefield, raised a sword the size of a cathedral. Its roar shook the earth. Clint inhaled slowly, his vision steadied. Everything else, fear, exhaustion, pain, faded. The world became rhythm, distance, wind, weight. All right, big guy, he muttered. Let's dance. He drew back his bow. The string hummed like a choir of angels. The arrow flew, glowing faintly with azure light. It struck the demon's eye, burrowing deep into its skull. The creature staggered, howling, then exploded in a wave of warp energy that consumed hundreds of lesser fiends. The line held for another hour, then two, and as the last of the arrows left his quiver, Barton smiled faintly beneath the scorched sky. Guess that's that. He reached for one final shaft, an arrow unlike the rest. The head was blackened, carved with runes of containment. He'd built it with the help of a grey knight, designed not to kill, but to seal. The breach in reality howled before him, a swirling wound of light and madness. From its heart, demonic figures clawed outward, shrieking his name in languages older than time. Clint stepped forward, every joint in his body screaming. His armor cracked as he knelt at the edge of the rift. He raised the arrow. "You want this world," he whispered. "You'll have to take it from me." He drew, aimed at the rift itself, and released. The arrow vanished into the storm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world exploded in light. A wave of force rippled outward, silencing everything. The warp screamed and folded in on itself. The demons vanished like smoke in sunlight. The rift began to collapse, threads of unreality pulling inward, devouring their own edges. When the light faded, Clint Barton was gone. Only his bow remained, lying in the dust beside a single, unbroken arrow shaft, its feathers burned black. Centuries later, the legend of the Hawk of Cadia became imperial doctrine. The Inquisition recorded his deeds in fragmented data scrolls. The Adeptus Mechanicus enshrined his bow in a reliquary, declaring it a holy instrument of precision. The Astra Militarum trained new regiments in the Barton discipline, a method of ranged warfare emphasizing focus, movement, and impossible accuracy. But among the Space Marines of the Ultramarines chapter, the tale was told differently. They said that Barton had not died, that when the rift closed, the warp had not consumed him, it had changed him. In the black libraries of the Ordo Chronos, records spoke of a lone figure seen across centuries of war. A man in dark armor, face hidden beneath a hood, wielding a weapon that glowed with blue fire. He appeared at the edge of doomed battles, struck unseen foes from impossible distances, and vanished before the dust settled. Some called him a myth. Others whispered that he had become something more, a silent guardian of the Imperium, bound not by allegiance, but by duty. One record, sealed by the Inquisition, described a meeting between a grey knight and the hooded archer during the siege of Terra Reborn. "You should not exist," the knight had said. The archer had smiled faintly. "Tell that to the warp." And with that, he'd vanished into the storm once again. The galaxy moved on. Empires rose and fell, yet in the endless dark, stories endured. In the trenches of the Guard, soldiers whispered of a phantom marksman who appeared when hope was lost. On worlds consumed by chaos, heretics told of invisible arrows that struck down their champions. Even the Eldar, those ancient wanderers of the stars, spoke his name with respect. They called him Shail Vain, the mortal who pierced the veil. And somewhere in the deep void, far from any star, a lone ship drifted. Within its dim hull, a figure stood before a viewport, gazing upon a storm of dying light. His armor was scarred, his bow slung across his back. Clint Barton had not aged. Time had long since lost its meaning for him. He closed his eyes, listening to the silence of the void. Somewhere out there, another war was beginning. Another world needed defending. And though he was tired, though the centuries weighed heavy upon his soul, he reached for his bow once more. "Still not done yet," he murmured. The ship turned toward the light of a distant battle, engines roaring to life. And the legend of the Hawk of Cadia continued, an eternal sentinel in the endless war, a single man standing watch over the galaxy that would never stop burning. In the 41st millennium, there is only war. But as long as one archer still draws his bow, there is also hope.